Since the late hours of last night, the administrator of the hospital asked our forces to create an evacuation corridor this morning for the people that can leave. That is what we've coordinated throughout the day. And we've seen people leaving, those that can, and those that can't have remained in the hospital together with medical staff that have maintained there. Over the night, we've brought some humanitarian assistance, including food and water, to the hospital for those that are continuing to stay there. But of course, when people are walking through a combat zone, it's important to distinguish themselves from the terrorists that are taking advantage of the civilian arena. This is what we're finding. This is precisely the reason why we are operating in the compound of Al-Shifa hospital, exposing what Hamas has been doing beneath and around and inside the hospital, in some of the special wards, and obviously and around the hospital compound where we found the bodies of 2 of the hostages. We've created a corridor for them to get out of the hospital and then to head south towards southern Gaza Strip. The area of the Mawasi is a safer zone in order for people to get out of harm's way.
We must be able to move from ad hoc delivery of assistance to a continuous flow of aid. You can call it what you will, and everyone has many different words for it. But the requirement from a humanitarian point of view is very simple. Stop the fighting to allow civilians to move safely. Do it for an indefinite period to facilitate an unimpeded humanitarian response. Give the people of Gaza a breather from the terrible things that have been put on them these last few weeks, and without condition, release all the hostages.
Aid workers are asked to be complicit in displacing the population, and we cannot fully protect people in UN premises under the UN flag. We cannot reach people in need, including thousands still trapped in the north. We cannot provide sufficient assistance to those we can reach. As our fuel stocks are almost completely depleted, our ability to work and deliver our mandate is under threat. The dehumanization rhetoric in this conflict is worrying, reminiscent of the worst possible times in history. The massacres of the 7th of October by Hamas were horrific, and we strongly condemn them. But we have heard statements from top Israeli officials referring to all Palestinians as human animals and promising them destruction and hell. This language is extremely dangerous.
Al-Shifa hospital must be enabled to function as a hospital. There are reportedly up to 300 health workers and 650 patients inside the hospital. Even if Hamas has used the hospital for military purposes, the hospital and indeed all healthcare facilities are never without protection under humanitarian law. The attacks by Hamas and other armed groups on Israel, the killing of 1,200 people, and the taking of more than 200 hostages were totally unjustifiable. But with at least 11,500 Gazans killed, 70% of them women and children, with 1.7 million people displaced, with 2/3 of Gaza's hospitals out of action, with no electricity, no fuel, no clean water, no food, with every bomb that kills or maims a child, with every family buried beneath the rubble of its own home, the scale of Israel's response appears increasingly unjustifiable.
No one is above the law. Breaches of international humanitarian law, even war crimes committed by one party, do not ever absolve the other from compliance with the principles of the law of war and their human rights obligations. All serious allegations of multiple and profound breaches of international humanitarian and human rights law, whoever commits them, demand rigorous investigation and full accountability. Where national authorities prove unwilling or unable to carry out such investigations, and where there are contested narratives on particularly significant incidents, international investigation is called for. These repeated calls by the global community must not be ignored, but implemented at once. There must be a ceasefire on humanitarian and human rights grounds and an end to the fighting, not only to deliver urgently needed food and provide meaningful humanitarian assistance, but also to create space for a path out of this horror.